The sun blazed over the quiet highway cutting through rural Tennessee, where a line of armored black SUVs moved steadily through the rising red dust. Inside the lead vehicle, President Donald Trump sat in silence, occasionally glancing at a folder filled with charts and statistics for his upcoming speech on economic revitalization. His thoughts, however, were elsewhere. As the convoy neared a small roadside group, Secret Service agents grew alert. This wasn't a protest or rally, just a few locals and a simple stand. Then Trump noticed something unusual. A young girl, around 10 or 11, standing beside a wooden crate with a cardboard sign that read, "Fresh eggs, $2 a dozen." She wore an oversized straw hat and dusty sneakers, her hands stained with dirt, but her face radiated not pity or desperation, just quiet hope. Without warning, Trump raised his hand. "Stop the convoy," he said. "Sir?" An agent asked, surprised. "I said stop." The brakes screeched as the convoy came to a dusty halt, tires grinding against the rural road. Secret Service. Agents moved quickly, forming a protective circle as President Trump stepped out, adjusting his suit jacket while the sun beat down on him. The little girl looked up, unsure who the man approaching her was. The small crowd fell silent. Then Trump asked a simple question. "Why are you selling eggs, sweetheart?" Her reply would change everything. Blinking up at him, her voice was soft but steady. "Because Mama can't walk today, sir. She had another dizzy spell, and we still needed to sell the eggs." Trump crouched beside her, more like a grandfather than a president. "What's your name?" he asked. "Leia," she said. "I'm 11. These eggs are from our hens Hazel, Pepper, and Dot. I feed them myself." A few in the crowd began whispering, recognizing him. Phones were raised, but Trump didn't seem to notice. "Where do you live, Leia?" She pointed to a dirt path leading past a field of wilting sunflowers. "Just up that way. Our roof leaks, but we've got good chickens." Trump looked at her, then asked gently, "And your dad?" Leia hesitated. "He left when I was 6. Mama says he's finding himself, but I think he got lost." Something in her honesty struck him. The agents murmured about the schedule, but he waved them off. "Let me buy every egg you've got." Her eyes widened. "All of them?" "It's 10 dozen. Trump pulled out his wallet. "That's $20, right?" Leia smiled shyly. "It's $20, but we're not a charity, sir." He laughed genuinely. "Then make it $100. I'm investing in your hens." She looked down, stunned. "Are you real?" she whispered. "I ask myself that a lot," Trump muttered with a faint smile. But something inside him had shifted. His eyes followed the dirt path leading to her home. He needed to see where Leia came from. When he began walking, the agents hesitated. "Sir, protocol," one started. "Forget the protocol," Trump said firmly. "This isn't a campaign stop, it's a people stop." Leia led the way, barefoot on gravel like it was nothing. "Watch the roots," she warned, glancing back. "I tripped on one yesterday and lost half a dozen eggs. Mama wasn't mad though. She says broken things still matter." Trump didn't respond, he just kept walking. Soon, a small white cabin appeared, its paint faded, porch sagging, windows patched with plastic. The roof looked years past repair, but delicate wind chimes danced beside the door. It was worn, but it was home. "Mama!" Leia called. "We got a visitor." The door creaked open. A woman appeared, early 30s, pale and thin, holding herself steady with a cane. Her eyes widened the moment she recognized who stood behind her daughter. "I'm Mr. President," she began, trembling. Trump raised a hand gently. "I'm not here to scare you. I just met your daughter. She's a remarkable young lady." Leia beamed. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "We don't have much, sir," she said, "but if you'd like water or some peach tea." Trump looked around the humble room. "Tea sounds good." As he stepped inside, An agent silently swept the space, but Trump was already seated. In a worn kitchen chair beside a chipped photo of toddler-aged Leia, he didn't need charts or numbers anymore. He was living the story. Her mother, Grace, poured peach tea into mismatched mugs, her hands shaking just slightly. Grace's hands trembled slightly, but her voice stayed steady. "I didn't expect to be hosting the president today," she said with a faint, wry smile. Trump chuckled. "I didn't expect to stop the motorcade for eggs." They both smiled. Grace sat across from him. "I was a teacher before Leia was born. Then the seizures started. Doctors still don't know why." Trump listened closely. "And you've been managing like this ever since?" She nodded. "I tried going back to work, but every time I collapsed, someone else had to clean up the mess. So I started selling what we had: eggs, chickens. Leia helps with everything." Trump looked over at Leia, who was quietly nibbling a biscuit in the corner. "That girl's stronger than half the men I've met in D.C. Grace's face softened. "She doesn't complain, she just keeps going." Trump leaned forward. "Grace, have you ever asked for help?" She paused, then said softly, "I've asked God. Figured he'd send someone eventually. Maybe not the president, but someone." A quiet moment passed. Then Trump asked gently, "Would you let me help?" Grace blinked, unsure. "I don't want pity." "It's not pity," Trump replied. "It's respect for what you've built, for who your daughter is." Grace looked at Leia, who simply nodded, as if she already knew something was shifting. Trump pulled out a pen, scribbled something on the back of a folded business card, and handed it to Grace. "Someone will contact you tomorrow. Trust them." As he stood, Grace reached for his hand. "I never voted for you," she said honestly. He smiled. "Doesn't matter. You raised Leia. That's enough for me." As the convoy pulled away, dust trailing behind, Leia stood clutching the card like it was a golden ticket. Her eyes sparkled as she read the name printed below the handwritten note. Sarah Lell, Office of Rural Development, Presidential Outreach. "Mama," she whispered, "do you think it's real?" Leia looked at her mother and asked softly, "Do you think it's real?" Grace sat on the porch, legs tucked beneath her, watching the sun rise over the fields. "I don't know, honey," she said gently, "but I think something just shifted in the world." Leia didn't know much about politics, but she knew that the man who sat in their kitchen yesterday hadn't just been the president. He had listened, and more importantly, he had seen her. The next morning, the phone rang. A warm voice greeted them. "Hello, this is Sarah Lell. I work with the president." "Is this Grace?" Grace's fingers tightened around the receiver. "Yes." He really meant it?" "He did," Sarah replied. "He asked us to visit you personally." "Would this Friday work?" Grace's heart pounded. Yes, of course." When she hung up, she turned to Leia, who was out back feeding Hazel and Dot. "They're coming," Grace whispered. "For the eggs?" Leia asked. Grace laughed a real, unguarded laugh, the first in weeks. "No, honey. I think they're coming for us." Across the country, footage of President Trump halting his motorcade for a little girl selling eggs had gone viral. But the true story was only beginning. Because this wasn't about charity, he had a plan. When Friday came, a sleek black SUV pulled up, not as flashy as the presidential convoy, but just as purposeful. Out stepped Sarah Lale, a woman with kind eyes and a briefcase full of possibilities. She shook Grace's hand firmly. "We're not here to inspect," she said. "We're here to invest." She walked the property, took notes, asked serious questions. "How much land do you own?" "About 5 acres, Grace answered. "But most of it's overgrown," Sarah nodded. "That can be fixed. The president wants this to be a pilot project, a model for rural renewal." Grace's eyes widened. "Us? A model?" Sarah smiled. "Yes, he believes small towns like yours are where America's heart still beats. She's the soul of this place," Grace said with a soft smile when Sarah asked about Leia. As they walked the property, Sarah jotted down notes, explaining that the president didn't want to change everything. He wanted to help them build something more, without losing what made it special. By sunset, a plan was already in motion. A new chicken coop funded through a rural development grant, solar panels to reduce energy costs, and even medical support for Grace through a little-known rural healthcare initiative passed months earlier. Grace couldn't find the words. She simply cried, then whispered to Leia, "You're going to have so many sisters." Back in Washington, Trump read the full report. For once, he wasn't focused on polling data or approval ratings. Instead, he circled a grainy photo of Leia standing proudly beside her egg stand, and beneath it, in his own handwriting, he scrawled, "This is America." Then he signed it, DT. News of the president's unexpected stop spread quickly across the region. Journalists descended on Grace's modest farm, intrigued by the story that had captured the nation's attention. The sudden spotlight overwhelmed Grace and Leia, but Sarah was ready. "We need to control the narrative," she said firmly. "This isn't just about one family, it's about every rural community trying to hold on." Leia, who once feared her story would be forgotten, now found herself speaking on local radio. Her words were simple, just about helping Mama, but they struck a deep chord with listeners who understood struggle. In Washington, Trump listened, unmoved by political warnings from his advisors. "This isn't politics," he said quietly. "It's people. And if we can't listen to people, what are we?" Meanwhile, Grace and Leia began receiving an outpouring of support letters from strangers, offers to volunteer, even small donations to help with the farm. A local hardware store owner dropped off new tools, and a retired nurse offered free home visits. Grace started to realize that something bigger was happening. Their quiet struggle had become a symbol, living proof that hope could grow even from the dust. One afternoon, while clearing brush, a car pulled up unexpectedly. Out stepped a man in his late 40s with a kind smile. "I'm Jack Turner," he said, offering his hand. "I saw your story on the news. I'm a chicken farmer not far from here." Jack explained how he'd once been in their shoes, barely getting by, until someone helped him. Now he wanted to return the favor. Grace was hesitant at first. "Why help us?" she asked. Jack simply shrugged. "Because someone helped me when I needed it. It's time to pay it forward." Over the weeks, Jack became a regular presence bringing tools, offering farming tips, and more importantly, giving Leia something Grace hadn't seen in a long time, a mentor who believed in her potential beyond a roadside egg stand. Grace watched their bond grow, and for the first time in years, she felt the weight on her shoulders begin to lift. One evening, as President Trump prepared for another speech, his phone buzzed. An envelope had arrived. It was a handwritten letter from Grace. "Dear Mr. President," it began, "thank you for stopping that day. You didn't just buy our eggs, you gave us a future. Mama is getting stronger, and Leia's dreams are growing. You reminded us that even when life feels broken, it still matters." Trump read it twice, then smiled, quietly moved. Without a word, he pinned it to the board in his office, a reminder that true leadership isn't just about policies, but about listening. Not everyone embraced the story. Critics called it a stunt. Social media buzzed with skepticism. Why stop a presidential convoy for eggs? What's the real agenda? Grace read aloud from the comments, the words cutting deeper than she expected. Beside her, Leia shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. The online doubt stung, but Sarah remained steady. "Truth doesn't need to shout," she told them. "It just needs to be lived." In Washington, President Trump faced his own wave of criticism. Advisors urged him to move on, to focus on safer political ground, but he stood firm. "This is real people, real lives. We're doing this." His resolve surprised many, even those closest to him, because this felt like more than politics. With the help of government grants and a growing network of community support, Grace's farm slowly transformed. A brand new barn stood where the old co-op had once leaned. Solar panels lined the roof, water pumps buzzed steadily, and progress filled the air. Leia launched a small egg delivery service, even hiring neighbors who'd lost their jobs in town. Grace brought on a nurse to help with her health. One golden evening, as they sat side by side on the porch, watching the sky blush with sunset, Leia leaned over and whispered, "Mama, we did it." Grace smiled through quiet tears. "No, baby, you did it. You never gave up." Their story became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even the smallest acts, when rooted in kindness, can grow into something powerful. One afternoon, Leia discovered a weathered envelope hidden beneath the porch steps. Inside was a handwritten letter from an anonymous donor, pledging funds to help expand the farm into a learning center for rural children. Grace held it in stunned silence. Who would do this? She asked, voice trembling. Leia looked up, her eyes wide with wonder. Maybe it's the world saying we matter. The letter reached Trump, too. He read it quietly, then picked up the phone. "Sarah," he said, "keep an eye on them. This could be the start of something bigger." And it was. The farm was no longer just a place to sell eggs. It was becoming a beacon of hope. With the anonymous donation, Grace and Leia began planning their new education center. They dreamed of a space where kids from nearby farms could learn about agriculture, science, and entrepreneurship. With Sarah's help, they wrote grant proposals and partnered with local schools and nonprofits. Then, one crisp morning, Leia stood in front of a small group of children, gently showing them how to care for newly hatched chicks. The children's eyes lit up with curiosity and joy. From a distance, Grace watched, proud, amazed, and more hopeful than ever before. Grace's heart swelled with pride as she watched Leia among the children, teaching with quiet confidence. She realized then that the center wasn't just a building, it was a legacy. Word spread quickly, and soon volunteers began arriving. Retired teachers, experienced farmers, even a local chef who offered cooking classes using fresh eggs and produce. Neighbors who had once struggled in isolation now worked side by side, finding purpose in unity. Jack Turner returned too, bringing his farmhands to lend a hand. The community was healing stronger, more connected than anyone had imagined. Leia's egg sales doubled, but the true reward was the sense of belonging that now defined their lives. Then one afternoon, a black car pulled up the driveway, and from it stepped the president's chief of staff. "I'm here on behalf of the president," he said, handing Grace and Leia an official envelope and invitation to speak at the National Agriculture Summit. It was more than recognition. It was a chance to share their journey with the country. Overwhelmed but honored, Grace and Leia accepted. At the summit, they stood before national leaders, telling their story of resilience and hope. Leia spoke with clarity and passion, her voice steady, her message powerful. In the front row, President Trump watched with quiet pride. Afterward, a group of philanthropists approached with offers of scholarships for rural youth and new funding for innovative farming programs. The story of a young girl selling eggs by the roadside had become a nationwide message of possibility and change. Back home, life settled into a hopeful rhythm. Grace's health steadily improved. Leia's dreams grew larger, and the farm flourished. One crisp evening, the two sat by the fire, the glow flickering across their faces. "We never imagined this," Grace whispered. "No," Leia replied with a smile, "but we believed in each other." They sat in peaceful silence, feeling the weight of the past ease, until nature reminded them that life is never without challenge. A powerful storm rolled in, and floodwaters began to threaten the region once more. When the storm struck, both the farm and the education center took heavy damage. But the community didn't falter. they came together, rescuing animals, salvaging what they could, and standing shoulder to shoulder in the mud and debris. Grace and Leia were heartbroken, but not broken. "This storm won't end us," Leia said, her voice firm with resolve. News of the disaster reached President Trump, who personally called to offer emergency aid. That moment reminded everyone watching that even in times of loss, hope still has a voice. With government support and the tireless efforts of their neighbors, the farm and center were not just restored, they were rebuilt stronger. New flood-resistant buildings rose, and detailed emergency plans were put in place. Through it all, Grace, Leia, and the community learned that true resilience isn't about avoiding the fall, it's about rising stronger afterward. Their story began to inspire others across the country who were weathering their own storms. Years later, Leia stood as the leader of a flourishing farm and educational center, where children laughed and learned in the very fields that once knew only hardship. Grace watched from the porch, pride and peace radiating from her. On the wall inside, framed behind glass, hung the letter she had once written to the president. In her heart, she could still hear his words. Sometimes the smallest moments change everything. And she knew, in that moment, their story was no longer just about eggs sold by the roadside. It had become a legacy of hope, of courage, and of a community that proved every life truly does matter.